They say surround yourself with experts, people that are smarter than you. And I knew to do that, and that's what we did, and that's the people that made it grow to what it is today.
Welcome to Drop and Give Me 20, where you learn keys to entrepreneurial success as Lindsey Germono interviews business owners with military backgrounds on what works and what doesn't. Listen as they focus on the stories, both challenges and wins, that military entrepreneurs have faced in growing their businesses.
Welcome to another episode of Drop and Give Me 20. I am your host, Lindsey Germono. It is so nice to be here today. I have an awesome guest, Frank Shankwitz, who I had the pleasure of hearing speak at a conference that I attended and left such a huge impression on me. Good morning to you. Good afternoon to me. Frank, how are you?
And good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh my goodness. No, it's my pleasure. I'm glad that you're busy. So I'm just glad that you're able to make time for us. And, you know, you've got a movie coming out. Either you're working on a movie, you've got so much going on. So thank you so much for coming on the Drop and Give Me 20 podcast.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I'd love for our listeners to hear a little bit about your military background. And I think you were Air Force, correct?
Yes, Air Force, and that was in the 60s, the start of the Vietnam era, and I was Vietnam era, but not a combat veteran. And my assignment in the Air Force was what they call then Air Police. I think it's now Security Police, but predominantly stationed in England for my 4 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then you, of course, moved on to amazing journey in entrepreneurship. Tell us what organization you founded when you got out of the Air Force.
Well, following the Air Force, I went to work for Motorola Incorporated here in Phoenix, Arizona. And at that time, this was a space age industry. And Motorola was especially looking for veterans because of the work ethic, the training, the reliability, hiring and the veterans, and also promoting them to get into the services benefits, the GI Bills, the college courses, and Motorola also supplemented that with sending college courses. So they were getting these veterans that maybe had no college training whatsoever and turning them into engineers. Oh, wow. And it was, again, that great work ethic. That's what they looked for. And especially at that time of the civilians, that was the hippie era. and the civilian employees they were hiring just couldn't make that cut. But following Motorola, I went on to join the Arizona Highway Patrol, which was my true career. I spent 42 years, just retired a couple years ago as a homicide detective with them. But during that period, I started what a lot of people may recognize today. I founded the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and that was in 1980. And a whole story about how that came about. But so successful right now with the current administration that's running that, because of one little boy that inspired me to start that foundation, has grown now to have 36 international chapters, 63 chapters in the United States, with over 350 wishes granted, all because of one little boy that inspired me to start the foundation.
My goodness. So when you were in the military, had you any idea that, that was going to, what if somebody were to come up to you during that time and go, hey, you're going to launch an organization that is going to impact the lives of thousands and thousands of people?
Oh, of course not. And again, the military, you're 18 years old, you're trying to, I always say that I was transforming into my manhood, and the military sealed that deal for me. Because they obviously gave you the maturity, what you need, and the training, the discipline. And I appreciate my years in the military.
Mm-hmm. So when I heard you speak, of course, you shared the story about how the Make-A-Wish Foundation, how you were inspired to form that. And of course, I'm sure you've talked about that until you're blue in the face, but would you mind, for our listeners, just running through that real quickly? I can't talk about it without tearing up and getting goosebumps. So I would love for people to, to hear how that came to fruition.
Well, it's, again, 1980, and there was a television show called Chips that was very popular at the time, especially with the young children. And the TV show Chips was about two California Highway Patrol motorcycle officers. And I was a motorcycle officer with the Arizona Highway Patrol. In fact, we trained initially with California, Our uniforms, our equipment were identical, except Oz obviously said Arizona. But because of this TV show, like I said, the children really, really liked this. And our department learned of a 7-year-old boy named Chris who had terminal leukemia and only a few weeks to live. And his heroes were Punch and John from Chips. Mm-hmm. And he always told his mother, when I grow up, someday I'm going to be a motorcycle officer just like Punch and John. And I wish I could meet a motorcycle officer. And she contacted the Arizona Highway Patrol, and through the permission of our commanders and his doctor, we set up a special day for Chris where he was picked up in our state police helicopter, flown to our headquarters building. And my commanders had asked me to stand by when the helicopter landed to meet Chris. And that was because I had worked with children all over the state of Arizona, my assignments. And I had no idea what to expect. I had never met Chris. I knew he was terminal. I thought our paramedics would help him out of that helicopter and bring him over to me. Helicopter landed, doors open, a little red pair of sneakers jumps out, comes running over the motorcycle. Hi, I'm Chris. Can I get on your motorcycle? This little boy was just having so much fun. And I'm just amazed that he's being a typical 7-year-old. Right. I'm looking at his mother who is standing by, and she's got tears in her eyes, and it dawned on me that's what she's seeing. It's just her son having a good time again instead of being on IVs. But Chris had watched Chip so much that he knew every switch and button on that motorcycle. Here's the red lights. Can I turn this on? Here's your flashers. Here's your radio. Open your saddlebag. Do you have the same thing this Punch had in his? And Chris went on that day to become the first and only honorary Highway Patrol officer in the history of the Arizona Highway Patrol, complete with his own badge, certificate, smoky hat, etc. And he got to go home that night instead of back to the hospital. His doctor who was with him said, I don't understand. His vitals are so good. Let him go home to his comfort zone. But that we felt good what we'd done about Chris, but a highway patrolman needs a uniform. And we went to the local uniform shop. So we have this little 7-year-old boy. He's about this tall, this wide. Can you make a uniform for Chris? Which they did. The two ladies spent all night making this uniform for him. The following day, we went to his house. We presented him with his uniform. Again, this little boy is just happy as can be. But he came up to me and he was just fascinated by the motorcycle wings on my uniform. And he said, I wish I could be a motorcycle officer. And I just started teasing him, telling him about the training we did. And I said, it's a shame you don't have a motorcycle, Chris. We'd test you right now in your driveway. Chris ran in the house, came riding out on a little battery-operated motorcycle that his mother got for him in place of a wheelchair.
Oh, my goodness.
We set up some traffic cones in his driveway. He was very serious going through the cones. He came back. He called me Officer Frank. Who can say Shankwitz? And he said, Officer Frank, did I pass? Yes, yes, you did, Chris. Am I a motorcycle officer? Yes, you are, Chris. When do I get my wings? And those were custom-made also. I told Chris I would order his wings, which I did. And he got to stay home again that day. I picked up the wings a couple days later. Just as I picked them up from the jeweler, I received a call. Chris is in the hospital in a coma, and he's probably not going to survive the day. I went to the hospital, and his uniform was hanging right by his bed. Just as I pinned on the wings on his uniform, he came out of the coma. He looked at me. He smiled. Am I a motorcycle officer now? Yes, you are, Chris. He just started rubbing the wings. He showed it to his mom, and he passed away shortly after that. And I always think maybe those wings helped carry him to heaven.
Every time I hear that, I mean, I've watched YouTube videos of you in preparation for our interview. I've read, and every single time I get to that point, I just get so choked up, which I'm sure is a reaction that you're quite used to at this point when you tell that story. But it's just, it's so amazing.
And what's interesting is we learned that Chris was going to be buried in a little town in southern Illinois, and my commanders asked if I would go back with another motorcycle officer and give him a full police funeral because they said we have lost a fellow officer, which we did. And we were met by Illinois State Police, City Police, County Police. Everybody that had never heard of this little boy wanted to help to bury this little young officer. And Chris was buried in uniform. Grave marker reads, Chris Gracious, Arizona Trooper. But flying home to Arizona, I just started thinking, this boy had a wish, and we made it happen. Why can't we do that for other children? And that's when the idea of the Make-A-Wish Foundation was born.
And look at it. I mean, from that point on, it has become so monumental.
The world's largest wish granting organization right now. And it took a lot of people to make that happen. I was the first president and CEO, but I had to make a career choice. Am I going to stay with that or a police officer? I knew what I was doing as a police officer, but they say surround yourself with experts, people that are smarter than you. And I knew to do that. And that's what we did. And that's the people that made it grow to what it is today.
So let's transition to those that are listening to this recording of course, what types of, or what piece of advice, if there's anything, can you give to those that are listening? They might be active duty themselves currently. They're maybe a military spouse or a veteran who, wants to think about going down this path of either creating a business for profit or a nonprofit?
Well, the biggest thing, and I'm with a group called American U that we do go to some of the bases to talk about the service people that are getting ready, either their enlistment is up or they're getting ready to retire and wanting to get into the business sector. And one of the things that we tell them is they are the chosen few. And what I said earlier about they have the training, the discipline, the ethic, the integrity that a lot of people in the civilian, their counterparts in the civilian world don't have. And there's this stigma that, oh my gosh, these guys, the veterans, the combat veterans, they just want to go out and hurt somebody in that, which is not true in the business world whatsoever. They're looking for these people. And to go into these businesses, I tell these guys, walk in there with pride. During my years of the service, Vietnam era, we were not allowed to travel in uniform. When we first got on, we had to travel in uniform. Then because of the protests against the Vietnam War and the service people, we could not travel in uniform. And I'm so proud today to see the people traveling in uniform, especially at airports. I travel, seems like every other week somewhere. When they're coming through, they get the applause, they get the handshakes, they get to say thank you for your service. And take pride in that. Be proud that you are the service person. And when you go into the civilian sector as a work, be proud. Stand a little bit above because you are a little bit above. You're that 1%, the warriors that's taking care of us.
Well, there you have it, folks. Directly from Frank, be proud and hold your head high. There are a couple of things that you shared with me when we had our pre-call. One of the things that you talked about was stickability. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you meant when you said stickability in the sense of, sharing advice with us as entrepreneurs?
I love that word, and I learned that from my mentor, a gentleman named Greg Reed. And when he asked me about the difficulty in starting the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and it took me 6 months to find the right people. Everybody said it's a bad idea. And I had learned as a child that to learn all those negatives, turn them into positives. And Greg said, you had stickability, a word that he had coined. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, you stuck with your mission. You didn't give up. Well, especially our military people, that's what it is. The mission, you complete the mission. And for starting, for instance, the Make-A-Wish Foundation, as I said, so many people said it's not going to work. And I turned all those negatives into the positives, found the right people, and had that stickability to stick with the mission, to stick with your ideas, your goals.
There was another piece of advice that you gave that I share this with people all the time, and that is you had said to make the best of your situation. Do you remember saying that and what you meant by that?
Yes, and I'll have to go back to a little bit of my childhood on that. Very, very strange childhood. A mother kidnapped me, divorce situation. My mother kidnapped me off a playground and tried to hide me. In fact, did hide me from my father for numerous years. Ended up in a little town called Seligman, Arizona on Route 66. But as seventh grade, she left me again. She said, I can't afford you anymore and you're on your own. And I had a father figure in that town, little town of 500 people. And he just said, and I was working as a dishwasher at the time, 10, 12 years old. And he said, we're going to have you live with this widow lady with room and board. And all of a sudden, you're going to have not this crummy situation we were living before. You're going to have your own room. You're going to have 3 meals a day. You're going to have somebody that actually helps take care of you. And again, you turn that negative as a positive and always make the best of your situation. And in fact, it was a better situation. And I've done that with whatever I could be. During my time in the military, obviously, we have some bad situations that go on. Every member does. Highway patrol, the same thing. I was involved in a high-speed chase on the motorcycle where I was hit by another drunk driver and actually pronounced dead at the scene and obviously brought back to life. We're talking today. But from that, make the best of your situation.
I heard that story, too, when you were sharing about the person that had given you, that was resuscitated you, how you started coming back with the sense of smell. You smelled her sense of smell. And I mean, it was just such a powerful story.
Well, it was an off-duty emergency room nurse that stopped at the scene. My partner had tried to revive me. He couldn't do it. They called in the code. 963 officer killed in the line of duty. And I learned this obviously later. Off-duty emergency room nurse stopped by. May I try and revive him? He's dead. Let me try. And obviously successful. But I learned later, talking to psychologists, when you die and you're coming back, your senses start coming in. The first sense was the sense of smell, and very nice, like perfume type odor. The sense of sound, you can hear these sirens in the background. She's brought him back. In my mind, what's going on? The sense of touch, something very nice and soft on my lips. The sense of sight. I open my eyes and here's this beautiful blonde with a lip lock on me. and I joke later, if this is heaven, this is great. I don't mind this at all. So.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think you shared that part in the conference that I was at too, and you had the whole room. Of course, the room was like, 98% female, so we were all like, touched.
What was so interesting on that is it took about 6 months to recover because of skull fracture, traumatic brain injury, broken bones, etc. But you have to talk with a police. We have to talk to a psychologist before we go back to work, make sure we're okay. And one of the things that they told me is God saved you for a reason. Now you have to find the reason. And it was a couple years later when I did meet this little boy that inspired me to start the Make-A-Wish Foundation. So I think God had a plan all along.
You said it better than anybody else there. You had said something that along the same lines when we talked last. I have it written down here. Everyone can be a hero and somehow give back, whether it's to a community or a family. Just get involved. And so we talked about that. And I remember thinking after, like, as a business owner, I don't know if it's just not talked about, or maybe it's just not one of the 5 things that as a business owner you need to focus on. But to do that in your business is, if you can give back, if you can figure out how to get involved. I mean, we do that, obviously, the agency does. So talk to me about how you feel, about businesses that, or even just business owners that get involved in causes.
Well, I stress that in my presentations. A motivational, inspirational speaker, a whole new career for me that I started a couple years ago. But speaking to the business community, and when I say that everybody can be a hero, you can give back. And I suggested to several real estate agencies, in fact, our one in our town, instead of a monetary contribution to somewhere, they can help out. They know all the contractors. They know everybody in the building industry. And an example here in our little town is now they pick out a person, generally an elderly person, a widow whose home is kind of run down. They get a weekend going with all of their agents and go out there, weed, paint, clean, everything they can do to help out this person, which is great. But the media picks it up immediately. Wow, look at what these people are doing. They are giving back to the community. And it's a win-win for everybody. The same with different type of drives. We have a veteran center here, and we just did a big, it's snowing right now, as a matter of fact, as we talk. And we did last month a big coat drive that several of the business communities came in, drop-off points and that. Again, the local media picked it up. Look, they're helping out. They're giving back to the community. And there's just so many easy ways for a business to do that. It doesn't always have to be a monetary donation, but to get your name out there, to be part of the community.
And that's going to make people want to do business with your company more, to see that.
Oh, exactly.
So it makes sense from every angle that you look at it. 1, you're doing good for the community and the cause. 2, you're instilling that in your company's culture and values and showing them, we're leading by example. And 3, obviously the media may or may not pick it up, but if they do, then that's a great exposure to what you're doing. But then at the end of the day, people see that and there's a question about, I want to hire, or I want to look at this real estate company. I'm going to choose this one because, of all the great things that they do in the community, that giving back and selflessness.
Exactly. And it's just whatever you can do. You can be a hero.
Mm-hmm. Well, Frank, we are coming up to the 20-minute mark of our Drop and Give Me 20 podcast. And I know we can go on I'd love to just sit down with you for hours and hear all of your stories, but you do have something very exciting that's coming around the corner. And I want to make sure that that you share that with us. You have a movie coming out, and how can we support you there?
Go see it when it comes out. There is a movie, and I was approached by Hollywood about 3 years ago. They said, we want to do a movie about your life. I said, no, you don't. Yes, we do. So it is, in fact, a feature motion picture. They have hired me as a consultant, and we are getting ready. We're in pre-production, but now we're just went into casting, and we start set design in March of this year and actual filming April 3rd. So pretty excited about the whole thing. It's an independent movie. Hopefully it'll be released at Sundance next year, and it's going to be fun.
It's called Wishman.
And Wishman. And then I also a book just came out, was released in November, called Wishman, which the movie is based on. And that's available at Amazon.
We will actually put that in the show notes. So anybody who's listening, if you go onto our website where we're going to list this episode, as well as on iTunes and et cetera, you'll be able to see the link for that book. So,
and if anybody wants to follow what I'm doing, they can get on my website, which is Wishman1, the number 1, wishman1.com.
All right, gang. Well, you heard it from Frank. Go do good things in your business. Go do the good things in your life. Frank, thank you again so much. It's so nice to be able to have you on the podcast. And I thank you for your service and thank you for all the wonderful things that you've done and continue to do. And those that are listening, please do follow Frank Shankwitz, wishman1.com. And also in the show notes of this podcast episode, I'll also share those links so that you can follow along in his journey. And we can't wait for that movie to come out.
Thank you so much, Lindsay.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Drop and Give Me 20, brought to you by Germono Advertising Company in Norfolk, Virginia. Please visit our podcast in iTunes, click on subscribe, and leave us a review. Your support goes a long way. When you subscribe and leave reviews, it helps the guests on our show as well. Jump in and let us know what you think. You can also follow all of our guests on the Drop and Give Me 20 Facebook page. We have Instagram and Twitter. Those handles are Give Me 20 Podcast. I'm your host, Lindsey Germono, and I appreciate you listening to the show.